I'm here with Rick Smolan, photographer and author, and has brought together some iconic works, including A Day in the Life of the Internet, or 24 Hours. What was the big
24
one?
Hours
the
in
major
cyberspace.
famous?
Well, the Day
hours.
in the Life books.
Day in the Life.
One day in different
There
countries
you
around the
go.
world.
The one I remember is 24 Hours in Cyberspace. So anyways, your most recent work, The Good Fight, we're going to talk about that and show some of the beautiful images there. But first, I want to get your take on how the world has changed and how technology has disrupted, if you will, the world of photography.
Well, I think a lot of us felt at the beginning that the internet, like there's all this optimism at the beginning. The internet was going to change the world. It was going to connect us in new ways. We were all going to learn about each other, infinite sources of information. And for a lot of photographers, it was very exciting because back when the internet was invented, or not invented, but the first time it became available to most people in 94, 95, I was still shooting on film. I used to work for National Geographic and Time and Life and a lot of magazines. And you know, it amuses me that we had these little rolls of film that only had 36 pictures on them. I used to go to the airport in Tokyo and try to talk a stewardess into carrying a barf bag taped up with gaffer's tape. And could you carry this to New York for me? And my Richie, our taxi driver, will meet you at JFK. And people would actually carry this sealed package for you to New York. Very different era. So when the internet came along and I could actually transmit my pictures seconds after I shot them to my editors and not worry about customs and not worrying about 3 days to get it back to New York, that was, you know, a miracle. The downside of it now is that every single person in the world, basically, or you know, 3/4 of the human race, is walking around with a multi-megapixel camera strapped to their waist or in their purse, and suddenly photography has become commoditized. So even though I still think there are only 200 or 300 men and women in the world that do the quality of photography that I want to feature in my books, there's a lot of 23-year-old picture buyers out there working at magazines now that are paying $50 for something somebody would have paid me $5,000 for, you know, 20 years ago. So it's really upended the whole industry.
So is that a good or a bad thing? It sounds like
the 23-year-old buyer.
It sounds like it's bad for. My sense is
creators.
the top 0.1%, it's sort of a metaphor for the large economy, the top 0.1% are probably killing it because the internet has spread their celebrity.
If you're Annie Leibovitz,
you're
the
good.
Internet is, you're fine.
Who's been hurt the hardest? The commercial photographer, the person who made a living, you know, sports photographer? Who's doing well, who isn't doing well? Is there any pockets of people that are doing great?
My background is I was a journalist, right? So I had the dream job. Somebody would call me on you know, Sunday night and say, "You'll be in Bangkok in 24 hours." No contracts, no hand. It was just all on the phone. And you know, you meet a writer at the Hilton in Bangkok, and you guys are off, and here you've got 3 weeks, you know, to shoot the story. I was being paid $300 a day in 1983. Today you get $200 a day.
Wow.
And back then they could only use 3 pictures for every day that I shot, and then they had to pay me more per picture. Now they get all rights to your pictures for all you know, for the internet, for the web, for everything. So it's actually probably about a third of what you're being paid, you know, 30 or 40 years ago. So for a journalist, it's awful. Some of the commercial people are still doing quite, as I said, Annie, and some of the people at the very top are doing great. There's a new young crop of photographers, but now the contracts, you know, Magnum is one of the great photo agencies. Magnum fought really hard to preserve the rights of photographers because a lot of them are now, you know, older, and you can retire if you own the copyright to your pictures. But now all the new contracts, a lot of them, this started with Getty, and with Corbis and all these companies, where they started basically saying, you know, if you shoot for us, we want to own your copyright. And if I'm a 21-year-old photographer, and someone's going to send me around the world, sure, you can have the rights to my copyright. But once that's eroded, you have nothing to live on later.
Well, it's sort of monopsony power, right? It's these few platforms that have so much power across the individuals who have
just boycott you. There's a lot of photographers out there, and you know, look. Buying the camera doesn't make you a great photographer, but the technology has gotten so good that you can, with Photoshop now,
you can be 95% of a great photographer. You
can fix a lot of pictures.
10% of the price. So it seems in general the same thing has happened in photography as other artistic sectors, and that is there's been an enormous transfer of value from the artisans, if you will, to the platforms.
To the people that deliver it, store it, and merchandise it, not the artists that are creating it in the first place.
What advice would you give to somebody, other than don't do it, who's decided they want to be in an image-based profession? They want to be a photographer, a cinematographer. Is there any there's still the School of Visual Arts, still a lot of kids who want to do this. Do you have any advice for them?
Well, I'll give you an example. There's a young guy, I spoke at a high school in San Francisco 20 years ago called Lick Wilmerding. Wonderful, fantastic high school, very hands-on. The kids had shopsmiths and they did things with their hands. And this young boy came up to me, 16 years old. His name was Josh Hayner. He brought a box of prints and he was sort of shaking. He came with his mother and showed me his pictures and said, could I intern for you for the summer? Sure. And so for several years he did. Josh just won the Pulitzer Prize.
Wow, nice.
Works for the New York Times.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that he was, again, sort of that generation where not only is he a great photographer, but he also is a programmer. He also does drone photography. He does storytelling. He does video. So anybody now who wants to be a journalist needs to be a sort of multi-hyphenate.
Technologist.
They can't just be a still photographer.
Yeah.
You have to be a storyteller,
Yeah.
and then you have to be able to tell that story in many different ways of telling that story, which is actually good.
Yeah.
I mean, because my frustration as a photographer is I would turn in my film. I'd shoot, 300 rolls of film on a story for National Geographic, and they would choose 12 pictures.
And someone else would tell the story.
Right, and now you have actually more control in a way if
Yep.
if you have all those different skills.
So talk about The Good Fight, your most recent work.
My original idea, every photographer, every photojournalist hopes that their pictures are going to change the world, not just document it, but you hope you're going to shock somebody or expose something or say, Scott, after you see this picture, you can't just
Make you feel something, capture a
right,
moment.
right. So last year, when we suddenly ended up with this new president,
Yeah.
I thought it would be really useful to look back over the last 100 years through the eyes of photographers of how much progress has been made in America and do a book called The Good Fight, America's Ongoing Struggle for Justice. Instead of being a contemporary one day or 1 week look at this idea, what if we went back and looked at the history of civil rights, the history of how women have fought to be treated equally in America, Jews, Muslims, the gay community, the disabled community, Latino Americans, African Americans, Native Americans, and find some of the most famous pictures, but also find pictures that no one's ever seen before. And then in addition to that, we added 63 pictures in the book where you can download an app called the Good Fight Viewer, and you point your phone at any one of these 63 pictures and you're suddenly watching a TED Talk or a documentary or a commercial that relates to it. So it sort of ties the 600-year-old medium of the book to the internet in this really delightful way.
Tell us about some of the images we're gonna look at.
There's a wonderful picture from the Women's March in Washington the day after Trump's inauguration, the largest protest in American history. And there's this wonderful sort of call-out caption where it says, in 2016, 800 women in America are going to run for office. And this year, 12,000 women are running for office. When the Dakota Pipeline protest took place, 300 different Native American tribes came together, the largest gathering of Native tribes in American history, to protest the pipeline. There's a picture in the book that I love of a Muslim American man with his daughter on his shoulders, standing next to a Jewish American man with his son on his shoulders at the airport in Chicago protesting Trump's ban. Until 1974, you're not going to believe this, we had something called ugly laws, which said if you were handicapped and your disability made other people uncomfortable, you could be arrested or fined. So they used to hide people that had physical deformities or handicaps out of sight because it made other people uncomfortable. There's an extraordinary picture of a group of young black men crying at a protest for Freddie Gray. And this picture is just heartbreaking, that sense of helplessness. There's a really chilling photograph of a grandmother in a Ku Klux Klan outfit kissing her granddaughter.
Yeah.
And to me, the picture's a Rorschach test because I see it as passing hatred on from one generation to the next. And I always contrast the picture of the Ku Klux Klan grandmother kissing her granddaughter with the Muslim American and the Jewish American fathers at the airport.
Yeah.
Of what do you pass on to your children?
The coffee table book industry, you're in a subset of, is that a bad term in the?
No, I don't. I know people always think it's, and I just insult you by saying coffee. It is
It's a big thing. It's an item. It's a decorative item that says, I buy a lot of these things because I want to appear that I'm more thoughtful and artistic than I am, so I always go into the Taschen bookstores. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, Taschen's great.
And I spend a bunch of money on these books, and some of them are in, some don't, but I put them on a thing saying, hey, I get it. It's like my subscription to The Economist. I don't read. I want people in airplanes to think I'm
people
smarter than
leave
them.
these in their homes as a statement of whether it's spas or desert places or civic courage, right?
Item.
Yeah, it's a statement about yourself.
It's you told me that this book to produce costs, the economics on it make it very difficult. So this thing, here, hold it up. What does this cost to produce versus, I just wrote a book, by the way, available now on Amazon. And you told me my book cost about 70 or 80 cents to produce, whereas this
costs about $12.50 to print.
This costs about $12.50 a book, right?
And we've got, it's 5-color printing, spot varnish, there's a ribbon, it comes in a slip case. It's got these 60 videos built in that. That's not even part of the cost of actually manufacturing the book. That was all extra on top.
So this is a difficult business, so to speak.
This ought to be a $70 book, and Amazon is selling it right now.
So is that the Women's March?
$23.
Oh, wait, what march is that?
This is the AIDS quilt.
Oh my gosh,
which,
yeah, that's
which
really
Cleve
powerful.
Jones came up with the idea of honoring all the people that died of AIDS that Washington was ignoring.
Yeah.
Until it started spreading to heterosexuals.
That was 88, 87,
yeah, around
88?
then. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just heartbreaking. And the story, this is written by Cleve Jones, the essay in here, and he was the one who's Harvey Milk's assistant when Harvey was killed in San Francisco, and he went on to create the AIDS quilt. And so amazingly, the stories in here are very, very personal. They're very sort of first-person stories, narratives. And a lot of them bring tears to your eyes, and you just think if it wasn't for that one person, how the whole course of history would have changed.
Good stuff. Rick Smolan, photographer and author of The Good Fight. Thanks for your time, Rick.
Thank you very much.
Fight the good fight.